This is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardines, to use this as an educational material. Learning objectives. First is how did global divide develop? Second is why the global divides the North and the South. Third is what is the difference between the Third World and Global South. And lastly, define the term Global South. Differentiate the Global South from the Third World.
Introduction to the Global North-South Divide. The global North-South divide is a critical issue that has profound implications for our world. It represents a stark contrast in socio-economic development between regions. In this presentation, we will explore the historical, economic, social, and political factors contributing to this divide. Before we dig deeper, let's define what we mean by the North and the South in this context. So, in the next slide, we will talk about the understanding the geographic categories. In the context of global North-South divide, the North typically refers to economically developed regions often found in the Northern Hemisphere. The South generally denotes less economically developed regions often in the Southern Hemisphere. It's important to note that these terms are relative and don't strictly adhere to geographical location. We use them to describe broad trends in economic and social development worldwide. So, in the next slide, we'll talk about the role of colonialism, imperialism, and economic exploitation. To understand the North-South global divide, we must delve into the historical roots. Colonialism, European power established empire worldwide exploiting resources and often leaving lasting legacies. Next is imperialism. Expansionist policies of dominant nation led to a territorial occupation and control over weaker regions. Next is economic exploitation. Extraction of wealth from colonies and less developed areas contribute to wealth disparities. These historical processes set the stage for economic and social disparities we see today. So, in the next slide, we'll examining economic disparities in the North and the South divide. Economic disparities are key aspect of the North-South divide. GDP per capita, the North generally boasts higher GDP per capita, indicating greater wealth and economic development. Access to resources. Northern regions often have better access to natural resources, giving them economic advantage. Next is trade imbalances. Imbalances in international trade can favor northern countries, exacerbating disparities. These economic factors contribute significantly to the global North-South divide. So, in the next slide, we will talk about understanding social and cultural contribution to the divide. Beyond economics, social and cultural factors plays a vital role in the North-South divide. First is education. Unequal access to quality education can limit opportunities in the South. Healthcare. Disparities in healthcare access and quality affect well-being and life expectancy. Next is cultural exchange. Cultural differences and limited exchange can impact understanding and cooperation. This factor highlight the multifaceted nature of the global divide. So, in the next slide, we'll talk about the influence of political system and international relations. Political system and governance are critical in shaping the North-South divide. Governance. First is governance. Politically, stability and effective governance often correlate with economic development. Next is the international relations. Relations between nations, including trade agreements and aids, can either elevate or exacerbate the divide. Next is geopolitical factors also plays a role in determining power dynamic between North and South. Understanding this political aspect is essential in addressing the global divide.
So I'm Decadet Jose Rosaupan, and today uh, my topic is social and cultural factors contributing to the divide. We have economic disparities and access and quality differences in access to quality education contribute significantly to the divide. Curriculum and language. Educational curricula can sometimes favor the dominant culture of the global north, potentially marginalizing the cultural heritage and language of the global south. This can lead to a loss of cultural identity and contribute to the divide. Healthcare disparities is uh, we have access to healthcare services and disease burden. This is a difference regions face distinct health challenges. The global south may contend with higher rates of infectious disease, malnutrition, and maternal mortality, while the global north faces non-communicable diseases. These disparities in health concerns can exacerbate the overall divide. Next is globalization and trade. Impact of globalization has both bridged and widened the divide. On one hand, it has increased access to information, technology, and markets, offering economic opportunities to many. On the other hand, it has exacerbated inequalities as wealth and resources often concentrate in the hands of a few. Cultural exchange have promoted understanding, but they can also lead to cultural homogenization, eroding local identities. Trade trade imbalance occur when a country imports significantly more than it exports, or vice versa. Trade imbalances can have various consequences, such as economic dependence, job displacement in certain industries, and curriculum fluctuations. These imbalances can either reduce or exacerbate the divide depending on how a nation manages them. For instance, excessive imports can harm local industries and job markets, worsening inequality, but a balanced approach to trade can stimulate economic growth and benefit a broader segment of the population. Environmental challenges, we have climate change. So climate change affects both the north and south, but it it impacts are often more severe in the south. Developing countries in the global south are disproportionately vulnerable to extreme weather events, rising sea levels, and agricultural disruptions, which can deepen poverty and food security. In contrast, wealthier countries in the global north often contribute more to the greenhouse gas emissions but have greater resources to adapt to and mitigate the effects. Depletion. Resource depletion, such as deforestation and overfishing, can harm ecosystems and livelihoods, primarily in the global north. Exploitative practices driven by demand from wealthier northern countries can lead to environmental degradation and exacerbate economic disparities. Sustainable resource management is crucial to addressing this issue, ensuring equitable access to resources for all. Efforts to bridge the gap for global north and south divide. We have United Nations. The UN plays a central role in addressing global disparities. Its agency and programs such as the United Nations Develop Program UNDP focus on poverty reduction, healthcare access, education, and gender equality. The UN also promotes diplomacy and peacekeeping to mitigate conflicts that exacerbate the divide. And we have Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs is established by the UN in 2015 provide a comprehensive framework for global development. They include goals related to poverty and eradication, health, education, gender equality, clean energy, and environmental sustainability. These goals guide international efforts to reduce disparities and promote prosperity worldwide. How did the global divide develop? The global divide between the North and South, often referred to as the North-South divide, as its roots in historical, economic, and geopolitical factors. Here are some key factors that contributed to its development. Colonialism. European colonial powers historically dominated and exploited many regions in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. This colonial legacy left lasting economic and social disparities in these areas. Economic gap. Industrialization in the 18th and 19th centuries primarily occurred in the Northern Hemisphere, giving rise to advanced economies in Europe and North America. This economic development created a significant gap wealth technology between the North and South. Global trade. The global economic system shaped by northern countries often favors their interests, making it difficult for the southern countries to compete on an equal footing. Geo- Geopolitical power. The North has historically held more geopolitical power, which has translated into influence over international organizations and policies, further perpetuating global inequalities. Debt burden. Many South countries face high level of debt, often out to northern financial institutions. Servicing these debts can limit their ability to invest in developing projects. Research exploitation. The North has often extracted resources from the South, benefiting northern corporations and government at the expense of southern nations. Political instability, factors such as corruption, conflict, and weak governance in some southern countries have hindered development efforts.
Good day, sir. Good day, everyone. So,
That's all for my part. Thank you. Next is
Global trade. The global trade economic system shaped by powerful northern countries often favors their interests, making it difficult for southern countries to compete on equal footing. Geopolitical power. The North has historically held more geopolitical power, which, which has translated into influence over international organizations and policies. Further perpetuation, global inequalities, deep burden. Many southern countries face high levels of debt, often owed to northern financial institutions. Servicing this debt can limit their ability to invest in developed projects. Resource exploitation. The North has often extracted resources such as from the benefiting northern corporation and governments at the expense of southern nations. Political instability factors such as corruption, conflict, and weakness in some southern countries has hindered development efforts.
Good day, everyone. Good day, sir. So, this is my topic. What is the difference between the third world and global south? So, third world and global south are terms that have been used historically to describe different aspects of the world's countries and regions, but they are not interchangeable and their meanings have evolved over time. Here are the key differences between these terms. Historical origin. Third World. The term Third World originated during the Cold War and referred to countries that were not aligned with either the Western capitalist bloc or the First World, or the Eastern communist bloc or the Second World. These countries were often newly independent nations in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Global South. The term Global South is a more modern and politically correct alternative to Third World. It emerged in the late 20th century as a way to describe countries that face economic and social challenges, often located in the southern hemisphere, but without the Cold War connotation associated with Third World. The second is geographical connotation. Third World. While the term Third World was originally more focused on political alignment during the Cold War, it has often been associated with economically and socially disadvantaged countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. However, it doesn't necessarily imply a specific geographical location. Global South. Global South is a term that emphasizes the global divisions between economically developed and less developed regions. It typically includes countries from Latin America, Africa, Asia, and Oceania, emphasizing their shared challenges and historical experience of colonization and economic exploitation. So that's all. Thank you.
The term Third World and Global South have historically been used to describe different concepts, but they are related and can overlap in some ways. Here's an overview of the differences. So, in the Third World, origin, economic focus, and broad scope. So, first is the origin. The term Third World originated during the Cold War era. It was used to categorize countries that were not aligned with either the Western capitalist bloc, the First World, or the Eastern communist bloc, the Second World. So, in the economic focus, the classification was primarily based on economic and political factors, with an emphasis on a country alignment in the bipolar world of the time. So, in the broad scope, the Third World encompassed a wide range of countries with diverse economic, social, political characteristics, making it a less precise term. The Global South, it has also three concepts: the origin, geographical focus, and development context. In the origin, the term Global South emerged as a more contemporary, nuanced alternative to the Third World. It gained popularity in the late 20th century and is still widely used today. In geographical focus, the Global South focuses more on the geographical location of countries. It includes regions in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and Oceania, which tend to have common socio-economic challenges and historical experience. So, in development context, the Global South is often used in discussions about development, poverty, inequality, and social justice. It highlights the disparities between the economically developed Global North and the less developed Global South. So, in summary, while both terms have been used to describe countries with economic, political challenges, Third World has more historical and political context, while Global South is more contemporary and geographically focused concepts that emphasizes development and global inequalities. However, the usage of these terms can vary, and some people may use them interchangeably or with different nuance. Political correctness. So, in the Third World, the term Third World has fallen out of favor in recent years because it can be seen as pejorative and lacking nuance, as it oversimplifies the complex realities of countries in these regions. So, in the Global South is considered a more politically correct and inclusive term as it does not carry the same negative connotations and recognizes the diversity and evolving nature of countries in these regions. Now in evolving meaning. Third world, over time, third world has been associated with poverty, underdevelopment, and lack of access to basic services. This oversimplification has been criticized for not accurately representing the diversity and potential for development in these regions. So now in Global South, Global South is often used to discuss issues related to economic inequality, development challenges, and global power imbalances, without pigeonholing these regions into a fixed category.
The term Global South emerged more than a half century ago but only became widespread after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. The Global South is a vital framework for understanding the complex geopolitical landscape of our world. It highlights the challenges and opportunities faced by countries in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and Oceania, and underscores the importance of addressing global disparities in economic development, political influence, and well-being, the driving economic growth, promoting social development, and demanding greater representation on the global stage. Recognizing the diversity and shared experience of nations in the Global South is essential for fostering international cooperation, promoting sustainable development, and creating a more equitable global order. Many international development initiatives and programs aim to support countries in the Global South to achieve sustainable development, improve living standards, and promote economic growth. These nations are typically characterized by lower levels of economic development, industrialization, and political influence in the global arena. Less economically developed countries. It is a broad term that comprises a variety of states with diverse levels of economic, culture, and political influence in the international order. Like the Philippines is considered part of the Global South because it shares many of the characteristics. It is a developing country with high poverty rates and significant informal sector, and it is heavily dependent on remittance from overseas workers and exports of raw materials. Problems such as corruption, unemployment, crimes, and poverty are the ones that hinder his country to be part of the developed countries, and deflation and abuse of natural resources. Progress won't occur in these countries unless outside and inside forces make positive changes for the well-being of its people and environment. That's all.
The difference between Global South and Third World. The term Global South is more modern and politically correct way of referring to countries that are economically and socially disadvantaged compared to the Global North or developed countries. It takes into account not only economic factors but also social, political, and cultural aspects. The Global South includes countries from various regions including Africa, Latin America, and Asia. It recognizes that these countries may have diverse level of development and challenges but are often united by their shared historical experience of colonialism and a desire for more equitable global representation. The Third World term is originated during the Cold War and was used to describe countries that were not aligned with either the Western Bloc or the Eastern Bloc. It primarily had a geopolitical and ideological connotation rather than an economic one. Over time, Third World
became associated with less developed or economically disadvantaged nations. The term is considered somewhat outdated and today because it oversimplifies complex global dynamics. While both terms refer to countries facing economic and social challenges, the Global South is a more inclusive and contemporary term that acknowledges a broader range of factors affecting these nations. Third world is an older term with a narrower geopolitical context that has fallen out of favor in modern.
So good day everyone. Today I'm discussing the emerge of new conceptions of global relations from Latin American's experience. Latin American countries played a significant role in shaping new conceptions of global relations through various experience. So number one, dependency theory. Latin American scholars such as Raoul Prebisch pioneered dependency theory, which argued that underdevelopment in the Global South was often a result of economic and structural dependencies on in the Global North. This challenged the idea of a purely equal global system and highlighted the role of economic exploitation. Second, non-aligned movement. During the Cold War, many Latin American countries along with nations from other regions, participated in the non-aligned movement. This demonstrated a desire for autonomy and a rejection of the bipolar power struggle between the superpowers. Third, economic integration. Latin American countries have explored have explored regional economic integration efforts such as Mercosur and the Pacific Alliance to strengthen their position in the global economy. This initiative reflects a desire for more balanced global economic relations. Number four, resource nationalization. Some Latin American countries like Venezuela and Bolivia nationalized their natural resources, challenging the dominance of multinational corporations and asserting greater control over their economies. And lastly, human rights and social movement. Latin American countries have also been at the forefront of advocating for human rights and social justice on the global stage movement, like the Zapatistas in Mexico and the landless workers movement in Brazil have highlighted issues of inequality and indigenous rights. And in the summary, Latin American experiences have contributed to the emergence of more nuanced and complex conceptions of global relations that go beyond traditional Cold War divisions and focus on issues of economic inequality, autonomy, and human rights in the Global South. These experiences have shaped discussion about global development, cooperation, and the power dynamics in the 21st century.